right, everyone, let's get started. So today we're going to talk about how technology is going to change work, and it's definitely a question we're all interested in. So changing gears a little bit from the education space, Gigster's focus is more on how technology changes the actual work environment. So if I work at a Fortune 500, an SMB, a mid-sized company, mostly doing white-collar work, how is that going to change over time? We started by thinking about the service economy because in our estimation, knowledge-based work is much easier to inflect with technology than physical work. So you can see a simple spectrum here. We're not trying to use technology to transform real estate or transportation and warehousing. We're on the higher end of the spectrum. So zooming in all the way to the top to professional services, you have some of the markets that are much kind of more automatable with data. Computer systems, legal, consulting. These are all areas where workers are using tools that have APIs to extract data. So the way we think of it is a lot of platforms that we see today focus on smaller ticket item work. So Uber, eBay, and Postmates. Companies like this, you're talking about sub $100 ticket items. A lot of these are far more automatable. Because they're a lot more formulaic in how they're done. In the case of Uber, you just need 2 GPS coordinates, and that's essentially an order, and that's structured data that a machine can go automate. But in the case of these other areas, so legal, computer systems, consulting, things like that, you're talking about 5-figure, 6-figure, even 7-figure projects, and that's a lot harder to automate. So as we move towards the second generation of services, so going from transportation services like Uber to something a lot more advanced where you're taking consulting and transforming how that works, we think there's going to be some pretty interesting changes. So obviously, as I said, cost is a lot higher. Distribution's a little bit different. So when you're delivering a software product, let's take software consulting as an example. We deliver a software product into an organization that's being distributed to many different people in the organization. Everyone has to interface with it. Versus an Uber ride or a Postmates is one person ordering a meal, one person ordering a destination. Delivery time is much longer. So an Uber ride could be 20 minutes, 30 minutes. We're talking about 3-4 month projects. Business impact is a lot higher, and it's materially harder to automate. But we think what's interesting, and this is more of a general take on how we see technology transforming knowledge work. But the interesting thing here is as technology addresses more of these services, we're going to see the world change in a lot of ways. We're going to see business change. So how specifically is that going to happen? So there's a few trends that you see. If you look at all the startups that are addressing this disruption of services, you're seeing much more distributed networks. So an example in the consulting space is Accenture has 400,000 employees, about 20 to 30% of whom are sitting on the bench at any time because they can't actually deploy that talent out to jobs. On the other hand, you have freelance systems like Odesk has over 1 million workers. On Gigster, we have around 1,000 workers. In a lot kind of more focused on higher end work, but you're seeing these networks that are able to work in a much more focused way because you're not paying workers while they're not working, and you have a lot more specialization. The services tend to be delivered on demand. There's a general consumerization of enterprise trend happening because if you work at enterprise, you're also a consumer, and you've come to expect a consumer grade level of user experience even on the enterprise services that you use. So you're seeing more of an on-demand nature where since you use freelancers, since you have more automation involved, it's easier to push a button and just get a service quickly. Data is optimizing everything. That tends to be the value proposition of every company. I think as the previous presenter said, if you're not using machine learning, you're definitely missing out. And there tends to be a level of curation that takes us away from Marketplace 1.0, where you engaged with random actors in the cloud. We've all heard Craigslist horror stories. So we've gone from that to now kind of a level of security and curation. So you could imagine a lot of different solutions. You could imagine that in the future you could push a button and hire a lawyer. You could push a button to do your taxes, which you can now do for certain types of taxes. And I guess we just hit tax day, so this is maybe particularly relevant. You could push a button to build blueprints, and then you could push a button to get software built. The challenge that we saw at Gigster is if I'm an executive at a Fortune 500 and I want to get development work done, it's often pretty difficult to do that with an internal team. So I have to go to my internal IT department. I have to politic, try to get resources, work budgets. If you can go outside of your internal team to an external resource that's kind of easier to work with, then you could have a significantly easier time. A lot of people want an easy way to use technology to transform what they're doing, so we wanted to provide that. Essentially put a software development team in your pocket, so to speak. So we're seeing, we believe, and a lot of people these days, including Uber, believe that freelancers are the future of how work is going to be delivered in a more transactional, more efficient manner. But over time, more artificial intelligence is kind of cross-fading into that mix. And this is conjecture on the number of years here, but this trend is happening quickly. Not tomorrow, but quickly. So today, people do work, and here you see an abstract version of a project development life cycle. But over time, machines help with several of these stages that we believe are very automatable, and we're seeing are automatable. In the case of Uber, computers would help you. The drivers know which area to be in, so they can pick up the most traffic, things like that. In software development, it's not too different. And eventually, machines can do a lot more. Not necessarily everything. There are definitely human steps around gathering requirements at the very beginning and on a handoff at the end. But a lot of the software is getting much higher level. You look at the languages that people work with, and 20, 30 years ago, it may have been assembly, C or C++. These days, you have very high-level languages where you can call a simple routine like screen.display, and it shows everything for you. So I find this comic interesting as a simple illustrated history. In early days, we used simple tools to do things. Over time, we've learned how to chain tools together. So one tool can act on another tool or build on top of another tool to get work done. Where we see ourselves getting to now is this human-in-the-loop, this kind of human-in-the-loop situation, which I'll talk about in a minute. And of course, there's this dystopian future where the machines are just working with each other and we're not in the loop. But hopefully, we remain in the loop. With human in the loop, there's a very real question of who's assisting who. Like, are the people assisting the machine to do the work, or is the machine assisting the person to do the work? And it depends on the application and the proportion of the work and who's doing the most important, most challenging parts. But we've seen with different parts of the software development lifecycle that you could kind of view it as one way or the other. So example, if I'm running, let's say I use artificial intelligence to augment my tax advisory firm. You could imagine the machine saying, hey, this client wants a tax deduction on maid services. The home is also used for work. Is that okay? And maybe I can ask a question, or I can just say yes. So the machine kind of is setting up a question for me and serving it to me in a silver platter so I can easily answer it. We call this a card flow interface for work, where you imagine human work divided down into microtasks, and the computer tells us when we have to come in and help it because there's a question that it's not able to answer itself. Another question could be a legal question. This new partner coming into a limited partnership wants full indemnification. What should we say? You could imagine a software development system where the developers aren't sure what do they build first, the login system or the profile pages for an application. Well, the human would say, obviously, you should build login first, because if you can't log in, you can't view a profile. But the computer might not know that yet. So by answering this question, this human worker, Sarah, could help the machine learn how to do that. So I want to talk about the two ends of the future of work spectrum, freelancers, or kind of micro work, and the idea of work automation. So we'll start on freelancers. Mary Meeker publishes a report every year that many of you have heard of and probably read. And she said something interesting in the last report, that 50% of Americans will be in the freelance economy by 2025. So this isn't necessarily to say there'll be full-time freelance workers. We see that trend happening faster and faster, particularly as the millennial workforce favors shorter and shorter tenures at a job. At some point, you approach a limit where they're not even really working for anybody anymore. We're not getting there yet, but there are definitely a lot more people who do want to find a way to earn money on the side, which is most of this 50%. So a thesis you might want to use if you were using freelancing to transform your business is how do I get the best people? Because ultimately you're probably going to have a good service if you get the best people. Well, it's not unlike building a real company, a company that doesn't employ freelancers. If you create the best place to work, you can attract the best people and ultimately deliver the best product to your customers. So we at Gigster asked ourselves, how do we create the best place to work, and what do freelancers look for? Well, they care about, in certain cases like developers, they want minimal client interaction. They want to work through a project manager. They want very clear specifications. They want to work on interesting projects with great people and get paid in a seamless way. They also don't want to bid against other freelancers, and they don't want to have to go find their own business. You see some consultants traveling around conferences, not unlike this one, handing out business cards. Well, a lot of developers, a lot of project managers, a lot of people in the software industry, they might not be a people person, and they might not enjoy that as much. You see a lot of consultants churn out of consulting after a while because it's too hard to keep themselves fed and keep work on the table. So ultimately, part of our job is to provide a steady stream of income and not let someone into our network unless we believe that in one form or fashion we can do that. So a couple innovations we've kind of had in freelancing. Go through some of these rapid fire. There's a very ambitious number of slides jammed into this presentation, so I try not to dwell on any of these for too long. So sourcing. When you source new workers for your talent pool, how do you source workers? Well, if you look at workers that have been successful in the past, you can find similar profiles. This is very simple pattern matching. There's software today that can parse resumes, look for similar backgrounds, and recommend similar people. Screening. Well, my co-founder, Dabo, used to do 40 phone interviews a day for our network. It's not a joke. He used to do 40 15-minute interviews a day in solid 10-hour blocks. Now we use a network of people that are validated interviewers from our freelance network. So the network interviews itself, which allows it to grow virally. Trust is a big question. So we touched on the Craigslist example I touched on that briefly before. Well, it's getting a little easier to trust people these days with the advent of a lot of technologies like this. You have technologies like Lemonade, where you can literally call an API to get a new insurance policy. Checker allows us to do background checks via an API, so a machine can ask for someone's background check information. They'll have them take a picture with their driver's license. It'll validate the realism of all of it. eBay and Amazon technologies like this have used ratings and reviews for a while to help establish trust. So we're not there, but we're definitely getting better. And the better this technology gets, the more it enables this freelance economy to thrive. Loyalty, this is an interesting one. So Uber spends a lot of their money actually acquiring new drivers. And it's an incredibly difficult thing to do when you have all these other driving networks you're competing with. Now mainly just Lyft. I think all the rest of them are dead. But one question they've asked is, how do we get people only driving for Uber and not also driving for Lyft? Because if we spend $500 or $1,000 acquiring a driver and training them, we don't want them also working for our competitors. Well, there are a lot of ways this is done. One example is rewards based on the number of rides you do per day. So if I want to hit Uber's reward levels, well, I'm not also going to drive for Lyft, right? Because then I'm going to miss Uber's levels. I'm going to miss, Uber because I'll be kind of doing half and half, and I won't get the full benefit from either. Much in the way that you like to fly with the same airline because you get incentives for doing that. Community. So this is one that's very easy to do and technologies involved. We have 500 people in our Slack instance, and they're all able to group together by personal interests, by the roles, where they live. We see them spontaneously forming meetups together. So in a digital world, they don't run into each other in the office, but it's very easy to establish community. It's very fluid. Knowledge sharing, of course. The one thing I'd say about this that I think is interesting is it creates a level playing field where every worker can be almost as good as the best worker. With Stack Overflow, when I used to be a software engineer, I would search Stack Overflow 50 times a day. It became like an ancillary brain because I could get questions answered quickly by the best engineers, which made me, for all intents and purposes, just as good as them. Performance is another one. So we measure performance on a scale think of it like basically like 200 to 800, kind of like a credit score. You start off at the lower end, and the more you do a good job on projects, your credit score goes up. So you can think of this as working like a loyalty system as well, because this motivates you to do more projects to raise your credit score, which then in turn gets you more work if you do well. Careers is another one. As our network gets bigger and bigger, we'll need people kind of overseeing each other. So we've started to think about how this works. You could imagine freelancers overseeing each other and earning some sort of MLM-style earnings. We haven't really ironed this out yet, but this kind of thing is going to be necessary as the labor force moves more freelance. So I'll talk briefly about work automation. I might skip over a few of these in interest of time. But the laws of work automation that we see is work today is measurable by data. So if I'm a digital worker using a tool like Jira, Asana, or Trello, Slack, GitHub, all of these have APIs I can extract work out of. You can identify patterns in that work and build tools to exploit those data patterns. So this is very much what we do, and it's the underpinning of all of the tools that we built, something like 5 or 10 simple tools that look at the software development lifecycle. So here's some examples of the work that we measure. In our case, it's people, projects, and activity on those projects. And our workers are using a lot of tools like these. As I said, if I send someone a text message, I'm a developer, I send my project manager a message and I say, hey, I think I'm going to be late. That can be sent through a number that routes through Twilio. Twilio can do some basic natural language processing on that text message and make an estimation on what I'm saying. And it can maybe flag the project status as red because the word late was used. So you can see an example here of patterns being used. In this case, the frequency of 2 parties in the project management team emailing drops off. That's on the top graph. You see it dropping off from week 2 to week 3 to week 4. The number of days the project is anticipated to be late goes up, or the number of days it actually is late goes up, and the customer satisfaction goes down. We know that customer satisfaction will go down in the future, and we can fix that issue before it happens. So we've seen that there's a lot of ways these patterns are exploitable. When a new project comes in, you could look at similar projects and you could estimate the best quote. You could look at similar projects to build the optimal team. So you could say, this team in the upper right did a project that's 90% similar based on a structured specification to a project that just came in. Let's give that team the work. You could imagine if I see activity happening, as I said earlier, that led to a certain non-optimal outcome, that we want to suggest activity that's going to lead to a more optimal outcome. If you split projects into pieces and you can find commonalities between those pieces, you can draw conclusions like this. And when you draw that conclusion, you could automatically contact customer support because a light on your board turns red instead of green. So at Gigster, which is the company that I'm founder and CEO of, where we've applied a lot of these principles, we've made some significant progress. In our case, what we deliver is new technology software development teams on demand to our customers. So again, if you're an executive at a company and needs software talent, you push a button, you get a full team. We guarantee the price, we guarantee the quality of the work. We focus on new technologies because just in the same way that we're using new technology to change software development, our customers are using new technology to change their businesses. So that's where we specialize. We've had great traction to date, so we're honored to work with an incredible list of clients, and they're very happy to work with us. You typically see very low NPS scores in this market, so we're proud to have a higher one. It's one of the reasons we started the business. We've gotten to work on cool projects like the technology behind flying cars, literally robot restaurants that make hamburgers. It was one of our projects. Shopping recommendation apps for great enterprise clients like eBay. Built a credit card visualization system for MasterCard. If you go to one of their lobbies, you might see this up on a TV, and other things like that. So if I can be helpful and you'd like to further talk about this, let me know. That's my email right there. Thank you for your time.